The smoke pressed into Elena's lungs like a living thing, hot and greedy, and she knew with absolute clarity that she had perhaps 90 seconds before consciousness failed her. The iron handle of the vault door glowed orange where the flames licked it from the other side, but she had already made her choice. She was the night archivist of the Metropolitan Vampire Registry, and inside that vault lay the only complete paper census of every registered vampire in the city, every donor contract, every territory agreement painstakingly recorded over 2 centuries. Digital backups existed, of course, but those could be altered, manipulated, erased. Was truth. Paper was law, and someone had set this fire deliberately during her shift, when the building should have been empty except for her. She yanked her sleeve down over her palm and grabbed the handle anyway. The fabric caught fire immediately. Elena screamed, dropping it, stumbling backward as the smoke thickened into a black wall. The sprinkler system had failed. The alarms had failed. Everything had failed except her own stubborn certainty that she could not let 200 years of documentation burn because she was afraid of dying. She tried the handle again, this time with her jacket wrapped around both hands, and this time she held on long enough to turn it. The mechanism shrieked. The door opened 6 inches before the heat drove her back, coughing so hard her vision spotted. Inside the vault she could see the shelves, the endless rows of ledgers and files, and already the flames were climbing the eastern wall. She lunged forward, grabbed the nearest ledger, the current census, the one that mattered most, and clutched it against her chest as she slammed the vault closed again. The fire had spread to the ceiling now. The exit she'd come through was gone, consumed. Elena pressed herself against the vault door, the coolest surface left in the room, and tried to think through the smoke. There was a window. Small, high, probably locked, but there. She dragged a chair across the floor, climbed onto it, and slammed her elbow into the glass. It cracked but didn't break. She hit it again. Again. The ledger tucked under one arm, her lungs screaming, her eyes streaming, and on the 4th strike the window shattered outward. Cold air rushed in. Elena gasped for it, stuck her head through the gap, and heard the roar of voices below. A crowd. Of course there was a crowd. The building was in the heart of the warehouse district, newly fashionable, full of late-night galleries and cocktail bars, and a 4-story fire made excellent entertainment. "She's still inside!" Someone screamed, and Elena realized they meant her. She waved weakly, but the smoke was pouring out the window now, and she couldn't get her shoulders through the gap. The glass had broken in jagged teeth. She'd cut herself to ribbons trying to squeeze out, and even if she managed it, the fall would likely kill her. She pulled back inside, dropped from the chair, and sank to the floor with the ledger pressed to her chest. This was how it ended then. 28 years old, graduate degree in archival science, dead in a fire because she loved paper more than breathing. Her mother would be furious. Below, in the crowd, the screaming intensified. Elena closed her eyes. At least she'd saved the census. They'd find it with her body, and whoever came after her would know what mattered. Then she heard footsteps. Impossible, deliberate footsteps coming toward her through the fire. Elena opened her eyes and saw him walk through the flames as though they were nothing more than a curtain. Tall, inhumanly tall, dressed in black that didn't burn, his hair white as snow and his skin the same bloodless shade. His eyes were the color of winter ice, pale and pitiless, and she knew him instantly, though they had never met. Xerxes Raith, the Vampire King, the one who ruled every house in the city, every territory from the river to the mountains. He walked through fire that would kill anything living, and his face showed nothing but cold intention. "The ledger," Elena croaked, holding it up. "You have to." He didn't take the ledger. He bent down, slid one arm beneath her knees and the other around her shoulders, and lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. The ledger stayed trapped between them. Elena's head spun. This close she could see that his skin was already blistering, the flesh blackening wherever the flames touched him. Fire was poison to vampires. Everyone knew that. Fire and sunlight, the only 2 things that could truly destroy them. He was burning for her. Xerxes Raith turned and walked back through the inferno, moving with impossible speed, and Elena buried her face against his chest as the heat tried to consume them both. She felt the impact as he crashed through something, wood or plaster, and then the sudden shocking cold of night air. Voices exploded around them. Phones flashed like stars. The Vampire King took 3 more steps, far enough from the building to be clear of falling debris, and then his legs buckled. He went down on one knee, still holding her, and only then did Elena see the extent of it. His hands were ruined, the flesh charred black and red. His face had blistered on one side, the skin peeling away to show bone beneath. His white hair had burned away in patches. He was dying. He had to be dying. "Get the ledger," Elena whispered, but her voice didn't carry. The crowd was a roaring wall of sound, and emergency vehicles were screaming closer, and Xerxes Raith looked at her with those winter eyes and said, in a voice like gravel, "Alive, you're alive." Then he collapsed completely, and Elena went down with him, the ledger still trapped between them, and the last thing she saw before the paramedics pulled them apart was the way the crowd had their phones out, filming, every single one of them recording the moment the Vampire King burned. The hospital refused to treat him, not out of malice, they simply had no idea how. Vampire physiology was a mystery to human medicine, and the few vampire physicians in the city were affiliated with the great houses, bound by politics and tradition. Within an hour of the fire, a delegation arrived from the House of Raith, 3 pale, cold-faced attendants who loaded their king onto a gurney and took him away without a word to anyone. Elena, suffering from smoke inhalation and minor burns, watched them go from her bed in the emergency room. A police officer was trying to ask her questions. A fire investigator wanted to know about accelerants. But all Elena could think about was the ledger, which she'd refused to let the paramedics take from her, and the look in Xerxes Raith's eyes as he collapsed alive. You're alive? Why had that mattered to him? She was nobody. A night archivist, a civil servant in a bureaucracy that served vampires and humans alike, maintaining the records that kept the city's fragile peace intact. She'd met him exactly once months ago when he'd come to sign a new territory agreement. He'd been in the building for 11 minutes. She'd handed him a pen. He hadn't looked at her twice. Miss Brennan, the investigator was saying. Miss Brennan, I need you to focus. Did you see anyone else in the building before the fire started? No. Elena's voice was raw, every word like swallowing glass. I was alone. I'm always alone on the night shift. And you went back for a book, a ledger, the vampire census. It's irreplaceable. The investigator and the police officer exchanged a look. Elena knew what they were thinking. That she'd risked her life for something that mattered only to the vampires, that she was foolish or indoctrinated, or perhaps a donor, one of those humans who gave blood in exchange for money and protection and the dark thrill of being useful to something powerful. She wasn't a donor. She'd never been bitten in her life. But she was an archivist, and the census mattered because truth mattered, because someone had tried to burn it, and that meant someone had something to hide. I want to go home, Elena said. They kept her overnight for observation despite her protests. By morning, the fire was all over the news. The Metropolitan Vampire Registry building had burned to the ground. One human survivor, the night archivist, who'd been rescued by the Vampire King himself in an act witnessed by hundreds and filmed by dozens. The footage was everywhere. Xerxes Raith walking into the flames, emerging moments later with Elena in his arms, his body visibly burning, collapsing in front of the cameras. The footage that showed a Vampire King could burn. Elena watched the news coverage on the hospital television and felt ice slide down her spine. Vampires ruled through strength, through the appearance of invincibility. The great houses circled one another like sharks, held in check only by the power of the king. And now everyone had proof that fire could destroy him. Someone had planned this. The fire, the timing, her presence, his response. Someone had wanted this exact outcome. Elena signed herself out of the hospital against medical advice and took a taxi back to her apartment with the ledger tucked under her arm. The building was old, narrow, squeezed between a laundromat and a faux restaurant in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't reached yet. Her flat was on the 3rd floor, upstairs that creaked past Mrs. Chen's apartment with its smell of incense and cooking oil. Small, cheap, hers. Elena unlocked the door, stepped inside, and only then let herself shake. She'd nearly died. She'd been saved by a vampire king who'd burned himself catastrophically to pull her out. And someone, somewhere, was probably very pleased with how the night had gone. Elena made tea because she didn't know what else to do. Her hands were bandaged, clumsy around the kettle. While the water boiled, she opened the ledger on her kitchen table and began to read. The census was organized by house, then by individual vampire, listing age, territory, donor contracts, and legal status. Elena knew it by heart. She'd maintained it for 3 years. But now she read it like a mystery, looking for the thing someone had wanted to burn. She was on page 47, halfway through the House of Morrigan, when someone knocked on her door. Elena froze. It was 4 in the morning. Nobody knocked at 4 in the morning unless something was wrong. Miss Brennan. The voice was male, smooth, unfamiliar. We need to speak with you about the fire. She didn't answer, didn't move. Through the peephole she could see 2 men in expensive dark suits, pale skin, too still. Vampires. We represent the Council of Houses, the voice continued. We understand you salvaged a ledger from the fire. That ledger is city property and must be turned over immediately for safekeeping, or destruction. I'll bring it to the municipal offices in the morning, Elena called through the door. I'm not receiving visitors right now. Miss Brennan, this is not a request. Then get a warrant. Silence. Then quietly, almost gently. You are alone in that apartment, human, fragile. We would hate for another accident to occur. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked at the ledger on her kitchen table, at the door with its single flimsy lock, and made a decision that was probably suicidal. She pulled out her phone and dialed the emergency number for the House of Raith. It rang 4 times. A woman's voice answered, cold and professional. House of Raith. My name is Elena Brennan. I'm the night archivist. Your king pulled me from the fire. There are vampires at my door threatening me for the census ledger I saved, and I think you should know about it. Another pause, then, stay on the line. Elena stayed on the line. The men outside her door had gone silent. She pressed her ear to the wood and heard nothing, but that meant nothing. Vampires could be silent as death when they wanted. 5 minutes passed. 10. Elena kept the phone pressed to her ear and heard only her own breathing and the distant hum of the laundromat below. Then a new voice came through the phone, male, harsh with exhaustion. Miss Brennan. This is Gregor Seneschal of the House of Raith. You are under the king's protection as of this moment. Do not open your door. We are sending guards. Is he? Elena stopped. She had no right to ask. Is the king alive? He is in dormancy. The burns were severe. He will wake, but not for some time. A pause. You saved the census. Yes, keep it safe. Trust no one. The fire was no accident, and whoever said it will not be pleased that you survived. The line went dead. Elena sat down at her kitchen table with her back to the wall and the ledger in front of her and waited. The men outside her door never knocked again, but she heard them leave, finally just before dawn. Footsteps receding down the stairs, the distant sound of a car pulling away. 20 minutes later there was another knock. Miss Brennan, House of Raith. We're here to secure the perimeter. She checked the peephole and saw 2 different vampires, these ones wearing the silver insignia of the king's personal guard. Elena opened the door. They didn't come inside. The taller one, a woman with white hair braided down her back, gave Elena a short nod. We'll be stationed in the building and on the street. You're safe now. For how long? Until the king wakes. And if he doesn't wake? The woman's expression didn't change. He will wake. He always does. She left. Elena closed the door, locked it, and went back to the ledger. For 3 days, Elena didn't leave her apartment. She called in to work what was left of work, with the building destroyed, and was told to take personal leave while they sorted out the recovery process. She lived on tea and instant noodles and read the census forward and backward, making notes, cross-referencing, looking for the anomalies. She found it on the 4th day. The House of Draven, one of the middling families, not powerful enough to challenge Raith but influential enough to matter. Their donor records showed 43 registered humans providing blood on contract. Standard practice, legal, regulated. But when Elena cross-referenced the contract expiration dates with the death records which she'd memorized years ago as part of her training, she found discrepancies. 12 donors listed as deceased in city records. But their contracts in the vampire census showed as active, renewed, ongoing. Dead people don't renew contracts, which meant either the death records were wrong, or someone in the House of Draven was filing false mortality reports and keeping donors off the books. Illegal donors meant unregulated feeding. It meant humans disappearing into the system. It meant the kind of abuse the registry had been created to prevent. Elena sat back, her pulse racing. This was it. This was what someone had tried to burn. The question was, who knew? And how high did it go? A knock on her door made her jump. She checked the peephole and saw Gregor, the seneschal, flanked by 2 guards. Elena opened the door. Gregor was shorter than she'd expected, compact and efficient-looking, his white hair cropped close to his skull. His eyes were dark rather than pale, unusual for a vampire. He looked at Elena, then at the ledger on her table, and said without preamble, "The king is awake. He's asking for you." Elena's mouth went dry. "Asking for me? He wants to know if you survived. If the ledger survived. He's in no condition to leave the house, so you'll have to come to him." Gregor's expression was unreadable. "Unless you'd prefer not to, I'll come." The words were out before Elena could think them through. "But I need to show him something, in the ledger. It's important." Gregor's eyes sharpened. "What did you find?" "Falsified records. The House of Draven. I think that's why someone set the fire." For a long moment Gregor said nothing. Then he nodded, once sharply. "Bring the ledger. The car is waiting." The House of Raith was not what Elena expected. She'd imagined a mansion, something gothic and ostentatious. Instead, the car took her to a building in the financial district, all glass and steel, modernist and cold. They entered through an underground garage and took a private elevator down, not up but down, into the earth where no sunlight could reach. The elevator opened onto a hallway of black marble and soft lighting. Gregor led her through a series of doors, each one requiring biometric scanning, until they reached a room that was obviously a bedroom. Massive, austere, the walls lined with books. And in the center, in a bed large enough to seem deliberate, lay Xerxes Raith. Elena had braced herself, but the sight still hit her like a fist. His face was a ruin of scar tissue, the burns healing but slowly, the skin still raw and angry. His hands were bandaged. His hair, what was left of it, was growing back in white patches. He should have looked diminished. Weak, he didn't. He was propped up on pillows, his winter-pale eyes open and alert, and when Elena entered the room, his gaze locked onto her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Miss Brennan, he said, and his voice was still gravel, still harsh, but there was something else in it now. Relief, maybe. You lived. You saved me. Elena didn't know what else to say. She stood there clutching the ledger to her chest like armor. You walked into fire. You could have died. I'm not dead, he said it flatly, a statement of fact. Then with the faintest edge of something that might have been humor, though it was near enough. Gregor cleared his throat. She found something in the census. Draven. Xerxes' attention shifted fractionally. Show me. Elena approached the bed, set the ledger on the table beside it, and opened it to the marked pages. She explained quickly, efficiently, the way she would to any superior. The discrepancies, the false death records, the illegal donor contracts. Xerxes listened in silence. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his scarred fingers resting on the pages. Draven, he said finally. They're ambitious. Not clever, but ambitious. They've wanted a seat on the inner council for years. He looked up at Elena. You realize what this means, that someone in Draven set the fire to destroy the evidence, and that they'll want you dead once they know you saved it. Elena had already worked that out. She nodded. Xerxes leaned back against the pillows, his eyes closing briefly. He looked exhausted, in pain, vulnerable in a way that Elena suspected he hated. You'll stay here, under guard, until this is resolved. I have an apartment which they know about, which they've already found. He opened his eyes again, and the look in them was absolute. You saved the census. That makes you valuable. It also makes you a target. I don't tolerate threats to those under my protection. Those under my protection. As though she'd become his responsibility the moment he pulled her from the fire, Elena should have argued. Should have insisted on her independence, her autonomy. Instead, she heard herself say, all right. Gregor looked faintly surprised. Xerxes simply nodded, once as though he'd expected nothing else. Gregor will show you to a room. You'll have access to whatever you need. Food, clothing, books. A pause. Safety, thank you. The words felt inadequate. Elena tried again. You're still healing because of me. I'm sorry. Something flickered across his scarred face. Not quite a smile, but close. I've survived worse. I'll survive this. He would, Elena thought. He would survive because he was too stubborn and too powerful to do anything else. But the cost had been high, and they both knew it. Gregor ushered her out. As the door closed behind them, Elena glanced back and saw Xerxes watching her, his pale eyes unreadable. The room Gregor gave her was larger than her entire apartment. Soft carpets, a bed with absurdly high thread count sheets, a bathroom with heated floors, a window that looked out onto an underground courtyard garden, lit by artificial sunlight that was kinder than the real thing. You're in the secure wing, Gregor explained. The king's personal quarters. No one gets in without clearance. He paused. He doesn't usually allow humans here. Why am I different? Gregor gave her a look that was almost pitying. Because you didn't run. Because you stayed in that fire to protect something that mattered. And because he burned for you, which means he's decided you're worth protecting. Elena wanted to argue that she wasn't worth a king burning himself to ash. But Gregor was already leaving, and the door was closing, and she was alone in a room underground with guards outside and a vampire king down the hall who'd nearly died for her. She sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process the last 4 days, failed, gave up, showered instead, using soap that cost more than her weekly grocery budget, and changed into the clothes someone had left on the dresser. Soft trousers, a sweater, everything in her size. Of course it was. Vampires were nothing if not efficient. When she emerged, there was food waiting on a tray. Real food. Roasted vegetables, fresh bread, cheese that smelled like it had never seen the inside of a plastic wrapper. Elena ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She was safe here. She believed that. The House of Raith was the most powerful in the city, and Xerxes Raith had claimed her as someone under his protection. But safety came with strings. It always did. And Elena didn't yet know what those strings would cost her. That night she dreamed of fire, of burning ledgers and hands that charred black in winter eyes watching her through flames. She woke gasping and found a glass of water on the bedside table that hadn't been there when she fell asleep. Someone had come in while she slept, checked on her. Left water. Elena drank it and lay back down and told herself the tight feeling in her chest was fear, not something else. She fell into a routine. Mornings spent reading in her room or the library, a vast space full of old books and new ones, fiction and history, and entire shelves devoted to vampire law. Afternoons she spent with the census, documenting the irregularities, building a case against Draven that would hold up in front of the Council of Houses. Evenings, Gregor brought her reports. The investigation into the fire, the political movements among the houses, the growing instability now that the king was wounded. 3 different houses had made territorial challenges in the weeks since the fire, small ones testing. Seeing how weak Xerxes really was. They're circling, Gregor said bluntly. They smell blood in the water. Elena looked up from the ledger. Is he strong enough to fight them? Not yet. The Burns fire doesn't heal like other wounds. It takes time, weeks, maybe months. Gregor's expression was grim. And every day he's weak is a day someone might decide to move against him. Then we use the ledger. We prove Draven set the fire, and we take them down before they can rally support. Gregor shook his head. It's not enough. Draven is middling, but they have allies. And right now, with the king vulnerable, those allies won't abandon them just because of some paperwork. This isn't paperwork. Elena's voice came out sharper than she intended. This is proof of illegal donor contracts. Proof of humans being disappeared. If that doesn't matter, it matters, Gregor cut in. But power matters more. You're human, Miss Brennan. You don't understand how we work. Then explain it to me. Gregor studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. Vampires respect strength. The king is strong, so they follow him. But strength isn't just physical. It's control, certainty, the appearance of invincibility. He gestured vaguely toward the room where Xerxes was recovering. That footage of him burning it broke the illusion. Now every house in the city is wondering if he's strong enough to hold them, and if he's not, they'll tear him apart. Elena felt cold. So what do? We keep him alive. We keep him hidden until he heals. And we hope no one makes a serious move before then. It wasn't a plan, it was a prayer. That night Elena couldn't sleep. She paced her room, restless, angry at the helplessness of it all. She'd saved the census. She had proof. But proof meant nothing without the power to enforce it. Finally, she left her room. The hallway was quiet, the guards at their posts but unobtrusive. Elena walked until she found herself outside Xerxes' door. She knocked softly, waited. After a moment, his voice came through. Enter. He was sitting up in bed, reading. The scars on his face had faded slightly, the raw red muted to pink. His hands were still bandaged, but he held the book carefully, precisely. He looked up when Elena entered, and his expression didn't change. Can't sleep, he asked. No. Elena closed the door behind her. Gregor told me about the challenges. About how the houses are circling. They always circle. It's their nature, because you're weak. Xerxes' eyes narrowed fractionally. I am healing. That's not the same as weakness, but they see it that way. Elena crossed the room, stopping at the foot of his bed. They saw you burn. They saw you collapse, and now they think you're vulnerable. And what would you have me do, Miss Brennan? Walk into the council chambers in this condition and remind them why they fear me. His voice was dry, edged with frustration. I can barely hold a book. I'm feeding every 6 hours just to keep my strength up. I am, for the moment, weak. It cost him to admit that. Elena could see it in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. You walked into fire for me, she said quietly. That's not weakness. It was foolish. It was brave. Xerxes looked at her, and for the first time, Elena saw something other than cold control in his eyes. Something raw. You didn't run. The building was burning, you were going to die, and you didn't run. You stayed for the census, for a book, for the truth. The truth, he echoed. Yes, that's what you said in the fire. The ledger. You have to. I thought you were going to ask me to save it instead of you. Elena blinked. Would you have? No, he said it simply, without hesitation. I would have saved you anyway. But I thought you'd ask. He set the book aside. No one has ever surprised me the way you did that night. Elena didn't know what to say to that. She stood there, at the foot of his bed, and felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. Gregor thinks we should hide until you're strong enough to fight again, she said finally. I think we should use the ledger. Present the evidence to the council. Force them to act. They won't act. Not while I'm like this, then I'll make them act. Xerxes went very still. You. I'm the archivist. I saved the census. I'm human, which means I'm neutral. Elena heard herself talking and couldn't stop. The idea was forming as she spoke, reckless and wild. If I present the evidence, they can't dismiss it as political. They'll have to acknowledge it. They'll kill you. Not if I do it publicly, in front of witnesses. The council meets in open session once a month. It's in 3 days. Elena's heart was racing. I'll request time to speak. I'll read the falsified records aloud. I'll make it impossible for them to ignore. Xerxes was shaking his head. You don't understand what you're suggesting. The council is not a human court. They don't care about laws or rules when power is at stake. Then what do they care about? Appearances, reputation, not being seen as weak or corrupt. He looked at her and his voice dropped. If you stand in front of them and accuse Draven, you'll make enemies, powerful ones, and I am in no condition to protect you from the consequences. I'm not asking you to protect me. You're in my house, under my care. That makes you my responsibility. His tone was sharp now, almost angry. I will not let you walk into danger because I'm too weak to stop it myself. This isn't about you. Elena stepped closer. Her hands clenched into fists. This is about the truth. About making sure the people who tried to burn the census, who tried to kill me, who put you in this bed, making sure they don't get away with it. And if they kill you for it, then at least I'll die doing something that matters. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Xerxes stared at her, and Elena stared back, refusing to flinch. You're stubborn, he said finally. So are you. I'm a king. Stubbornness is a requirement. I'm an archivist. Same. The ghost of a smile touched his scarred mouth. It vanished almost immediately, but it had been there. You're serious about this, yes. Xerxes was quiet for a long moment. Then he shifted, wincing slightly, and held out one bandaged hand. Give me the ledger. Let me see what you've found. Elena retrieved it from her room and brought it back. She sat on the edge of his bed in intimacy that should have felt strange but didn't, and walked him through the evidence. The falsified death records, the illegal donor contracts, the pattern of disappearances that pointed to something darker than simple regulatory failure. Xerxes listened, his fingers tracing the entries, his expression growing colder with each page. Draven, he said at last, and whoever's backing them. This kind of operation doesn't happen without support. Can you tell who? Not from this. But the council will know. Or suspect. He closed the ledger. If you do this, if you stand before them and present this evidence, you'll be painting a target on your back. Not just from Draven. From everyone who benefits from the status quo. I know, and you're willing to take that risk. Are you willing to let me? Xerxes looked at her, and Elena saw the struggle in his eyes. The king who never showed weakness, who ruled through strength and control, forced to choose between protecting her and trusting her to protect herself. I don't like it, he said. I didn't ask if you liked it. Another ghost of a smile. No, you didn't. He was quiet for a moment. Then, if you do this, I'll be there, in the council chamber. I may be weak, but I'm still king, and my presence will offer some protection. You're not healed enough. I'll be there, he repeated, and his voice left no room for argument. You walk into that chamber. You don't walk alone. Elena felt something warm and dangerous unfold in her chest. Gratitude, maybe, or something closer to the feeling she'd had when he walked through fire to reach her. Thank you, she said. Xerxes inclined his head. Then, quieter, you should rest. 3 days isn't much time to prepare. Elena nodded and stood. At the door she paused and looked back. Xerxes was watching her, his pale eyes unreadable. Why did you save me? She asked. Really, I'm nobody, just an archivist. You stayed in the fire for something you believed in. Xerxes said, that's not nobody. That's rare, and rare things are worth saving. Elena left before he could see the heat rising in her face. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Elena rehearsed her presentation, memorized the evidence, prepared for every question and objection the council might raise. Gregor provided intelligence on the council members, who could be swayed, who was loyal to Draven, who might be convinced by a compelling argument. Xerxes healed slowly. Elena saw him each evening, ostensibly to review strategy, but really because being near him had become something she looked forward to. He was sharp, dry-witted, uncompromising. He treated her like an equal, not a fragile human to be coddled, and he listened when she spoke, truly listened, in a way that made her feel seen. On the second night she asked him about the fire, about what it had felt like to walk through it. Like dying, he said bluntly. Fire burns us differently. It's not just pain, it's dissolution, the body breaking down, the self unraveling. I've been wounded before, stabbed, shot, poisoned. Fire is worse. And you did it anyway. You were inside. You didn't know me. I knew enough. He looked at her, and his voice softened fractionally. You stayed. That told me everything. On the third night, the night before the council session, Elena couldn't sleep again. She went to his room and found him awake, standing by the window looking out at the underground garden. Nervous, he asked without turning. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He glanced at her. But you'll do well. You're prepared, you're right, and you're braver than you think. I don't feel brave. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite it. He turned to face her fully. The scars on his face had faded to pale lines, still visible but healing. You walked back into a burning building for a book. You're standing before a council of vampires to accuse one of their own. You are brave, Elena Brennan, whether you feel it or not. It was the first time he'd used her first name. Elena felt it like a touch. Will they listen? She asked. Some of them. The ones who care about the law, about the old codes. The rest will resist because they don't like being told they've failed. He crossed the room to her, moving stiffly but under his own power. But you'll make them listen. You have something they don't. What? The truth, and the will to speak it. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I'll be there. If anything goes wrong, I'll intervene. You're not strong enough. I'm strong enough for this. His voice was absolute. Then, quieter, I won't let them hurt you. Elena believed him. That was the strange part. She believed him completely. Thank you, she said. Then, before she could second-guess herself, for everything, for saving me, for trusting me. For Xerxes reached out and brushed a strand of hair back from her face, a gesture so gentle it stole her breath. His fingers were still bandaged, but the touch was careful, deliberate. Sleep, he said. You'll need your strength tomorrow. Elena nodded, and left, her heart pounding, the ghost of his touch still warm against her skin. The council of houses met in a hall beneath the old cathedral, a vast space of stone and shadow that predated the city above it. Elena entered with Gregor at her side, the ledger clutched in her hands, and tried not to stare. The council sat in a semicircle, 12 vampires representing the 12 great houses, all of them pale and cold and ancient. At the center, raised slightly above the others, was a 13th chair, the king's seat, empty because Xerxes Raith was not yet strong enough to take it. Except he was already there. Elena saw him as soon as she entered, standing rather than sitting, dressed in black with a high collar that hid some of the scars. He looked like death warmed over, too thin, too pale, the marks of the fire still visible on his skin. But he stood straight, his shoulders back, his winter eyes sweeping the room with absolute authority. The other council members had gone silent at his entrance. "Your Majesty," one of them said, a woman with silver hair and a sharp face. "We did not expect you, and yet here I am." Xerxes's voice carried easily through the hall. "Miss Brennan has information relevant to this council. She will speak, and you will listen." It wasn't a request. Xerxes moved to his chair and sat, the motion controlled but clearly painful. He didn't let it show on his face. Elena watched him, saw the sheer will it took for him to project strength, and felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Gregor nudged her forward. Elena stepped into the center of the hall, into the circle of 12 pairs of eyes, and began. "My name is Elena Brennan. I am the night archivist of the Metropolitan Vampire Registry. 8 days ago, the registry building was set on fire while I was inside. I survived, and I saved the master census ledger." She held it up. "This ledger contains evidence of a crime. The House of Draven has been falsifying death records and maintaining illegal donor contracts. 12 humans reported dead to the city are still listed as active donors in the vampire census. This is a violation of the blood accord, a violation of the laws that govern our shared city, and a violation of the trust between your people and mine." Silence. Then from the far side of the semicircle, a man with a cruel mouth and cold eyes leaned forward. Lord Draven himself. "The human speaks out of turn," he said. And without evidence, Elena opened the ledger. Donor contract 4471B, registered to the House of Draven, Vampire Lucian of Draven, donor name Michael Reyes. Contract renewed 6 months ago. Michael Reyes was reported dead 7 months ago, cause of death listed as car accident. She turned the page. Donor contract 4489C, registered to the House of Draven, Vampire Celeste of Draven, donor name Sarah Lim. Contract renewed 3 months ago. Sarah Lim was reported dead 4 months ago, drowning. Another page. Shall I continue? Draven's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Clerical errors. The registry is a shambles, everyone knows this. The registry is meticulous, Elena shot back. I've maintained it for 3 years. These are not errors, these are falsified reports, filed deliberately to hide illegal feeding. And what would a human know about our laws? More than you'd like, apparently. A ripple of something amusement maybe went through the council. Xerxes in his chair said nothing. But Elena felt his presence like a shield at her back. The silver-haired woman spoke. "These are serious accusations, Miss Brennan. Do you have proof beyond the ledger?" "The ledger is proof. Cross-reference it with the city death records. The discrepancies are clear. Death records can be falsified. So can vampire contracts. But when the two contradict each other, and when that contradiction benefits one house consistently, the pattern speaks for itself." Elena met the woman's gaze. "Unless you're suggesting the registry itself is corrupt, I am suggesting that a human archivist, traumatized by a fire, may be seeing conspiracy where there is only confusion." Elena felt anger hot and bright. "I am not confused and I am not traumatized. I am telling you that someone in this room tried to destroy the evidence of their crimes. And when that failed, they tried to have me killed for saving it." "Proof?" Draven asked, his voice silky. "Do you have proof that I set the fire?" "Not yet, but the fire started in the records hall during my shift when the building should have been empty. The sprinklers failed, the alarms failed. Someone planned it, someone wanted the census destroyed." Elena looked directly at him. "And you're the one who benefits most from that destruction." Draven stood. He was tall, imposing, his presence filling the hall. "I will not be accused by a human of crimes I did not commit. This is absurd. This council should dismiss her claims and sit down." Xerxes's voice cut through the room like a blade. He hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, but every vampire in the hall went still. "She speaks with my authority. You will listen." Draven hesitated. Then slowly he sat. Xerxes looked at Elena and gave the faintest nod. "Continue." Elena took a breath. "The blood accord exists because our people made a choice. Humans and vampires sharing one city under one set of laws. You feed, we donate, and in exchange we trust that you will not abuse that power. These contracts prove that trust has been broken. If this council does not act, if you allow this to stand, you are telling every human in this city that our laws mean nothing, that we mean nothing." She closed the ledger. "I came here because I believe the council is better than that, because I believe you care about the truth. Prove me right." The silence that followed was absolute. Then the silver-haired woman spoke. "I move to investigate the House of Draven, audit their contracts, audit their donors, and cross-reference the results with city death records. Seconded, said another council member, a man with tired eyes. Draven surged to his feet again. This is a political attack. This is justice, Xerxes said, and his voice was ice. The motion is carried. Draven, you will submit to the audit. Refuse and you will be removed from this council. Draven's face twisted with fury. For a moment Elena thought he might lunge at her, but Xerxes stood slowly, painfully, but he stood, and the sheer presence of him, even wounded, was enough to make Draven hesitate. We are adjourned, Xerxes said. Miss Brennan, you will come with me. The fallout was immediate. Within hours the audit teams were dispatched to the house of Draven. Within a day they'd found the proof: illegal donors, humans held against their will, feeding operations that violated every tenet of the Blood Accord. Draven himself fled, but his lieutenants were arrested. The house was dismantled, its assets seized, its members scattered, and Elena, the human archivist who'd stood before the council and refused to back down, became something of a legend. She didn't feel legendary. She felt exhausted. Xerxes found her in the library. 2 days after the council session, sitting in a pool of lamplight with a book she wasn't really reading. You should be resting, he said. So should you. He sat down across from her, moving more easily now. The scars were fading. His strength was returning. In another week he'd be fully healed, and Elena would have to leave, return to her life, her apartment, her work. The thought made her chest ache. You did well, Xerxes said. The council is impressed, terrified, but impressed. I just told the truth. You made them listen. That's rarer than truth. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Gregor tells me you've been asking about the new registry building. The plans for reconstruction. Elena nodded. They're rebuilding on the same site. Fireproof this time, with better security. I want to make sure the archives are designed properly. You're going back to work then? Of course. It's my job, even after everything. Elena met his gaze. Especially after everything. Someone tried to destroy the registry, and they failed. I'm not going to let them win by walking away. Xerxes smiled, a real smile this time. Stubborn, you've mentioned. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Xerxes said quietly, I owe you an apology. Elena blinked. For what? For underestimating you. For thinking you needed protection more than you needed trust. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his pale eyes serious. You saved the census. You stood before the council. You did what I couldn't do in a way I couldn't have done it. And I should have trusted you from the start. You did trust me. You let me speak, after trying to talk you out of it. His mouth quirked. You're better at this than I am. The truth, the law, making people care about what's right. I rule through strength. You rule through conviction. It's humbling. Elena didn't know what to say. The Vampire King apologizing to her, calling her approach better than his. I couldn't have done it without you, she said finally. You were there. That mattered. And I'll keep being there, if you'll allow it. Elena's heart skipped. What do you mean? Xerxes hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable. I've lived a long time, centuries. I've ruled, I've fought, I've survived, but I've never met anyone like you. Someone who walks into fire for what they believe in. Someone who stands in front of a council of predators and refuses to blink. He paused. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. You walked into fire for me, Elena whispered. Yes, and I'd do it again. He reached across the space between them and took her hand carefully, his bandaged fingers curling around hers. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's possible. You're human. I'm a vampire king. I know, but I know I don't want to lose you. His grip tightened fractionally. Stay. Not as a guest, not as someone under protection. Stay because you want to. Because he stopped. Started again because I'm asking. Elena looked at him, at the scars she'd caused by being too stubborn to run, at the winter eyes that had watched her through flames, at the man, the vampire, the king who'd saved her and trusted her and let her save him in return. I'm not going to live forever, she said. I'm human. I'll age. I'll die. You'll outlive me by centuries, I know. And that doesn't bother you? It terrifies me. Xerxes said it simply, honestly. But the thought of not having you in my life, that terrifies me more. Elena's breath caught. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. I'd stay, but I need my work, the registry, the archives. It matters to me. I know, and I wouldn't ask you to give it up. He smiled slightly. I've seen what you're willing to burn for. I'm not foolish enough to stand between you and your calling. Then yes. Elena felt the smile breaking across her face, warm and inevitable. I'll stay. Xerxes exhaled, and the relief in his expression was so naked it made her heart ache. He stood, drawing her up with him, and for a moment they just stood there, hands clasped, the space between them charged with possibility. I should warn you, Xerxes said, his voice dropping. I'm not easy to live with. I'm old, set in my ways, and I have a kingdom to run. There will be politics, danger, enemies. Your life will be complicated. My life is already complicated. I'm in love with a vampire king. His eyes widened fractionally. You, yes. Elena said it firmly. No hesitation. I think I have been since you walked through fire, maybe before. Xerxes cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the bandages. Elena Brennan, archivist, stubborn, brave, impossible woman. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. I love you. I will love you for as long as you'll let me. And when you're gone, his voice caught. When you're gone, I'll remember you. The woman who didn't run. The woman who changed everything. I'm not gone yet. Elena reached up, her fingers tracing the scars on his face. And I'm not going anywhere for a long time. Good. Xerxes closed the distance between them and kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise. Elena kissed him back and felt the last piece of herself click into place. This was where she belonged. Not just in his arms, but here in this strange life she'd stumbled into. The archives, the council, the danger in politics and impossible choices. With him they broke apart, breathless, and Xerxes rested his forehead against hers again. There's one more thing. What? Eventually, not now, but eventually you'll have to decide whether you want to stay human or whether you want... He stopped. Whether you want to turn to become like me. It's your choice. Always your choice, but it's a choice you'll have to make. Elena had thought about this. Late at night, alone, she'd thought about it, about immortality, about giving up the sun, about the cost and the gain. Can I think about it, she asked. Take all the time you need, years if you want. Xerxes smiled. I'm patient, you're a vampire, you have to be true. Elena laughed, and the sound filled the quiet library. Ask me again, later. When the registry is rebuilt, when things are settled, I will. Xerxes kissed her again, brief and sweet. But whatever you choose, I'll be here. Human or vampire, mortal or immortal, I'll be here. It was a promise, and Elena believed it. The months that followed were chaotic. The registry was rebuilt, better and stronger than before. Elena oversaw the new archives personally, designing systems that would survive fire, flood, and sabotage. The council formally censured the remnants of House Draven and implemented new oversight for donor contracts. The illegal donors were found, freed, given reparations and counseling. And Elena moved into the House of Raith. Not into Xerxes' rooms, not yet, but into the wing nearby. Close enough to matter. Close enough that the other houses knew she was under the king's protection, that harming her meant answering to him. They were careful at first. Public appearances were rare, but word spread anyway. The vampire king and the human archivist. An impossible pairing. A scandal in some circles, a curiosity in others. Elena didn't care. She had her work, her purpose, and she had him. That was enough. Xerxes healed completely. The scars faded to faint silver lines, barely visible unless you knew where to look. His strength returned, and with it, his authority. The challenges from the other houses ceased. The city settled into a new equilibrium. And at night, when the work was done and the council was quiet, Elena and Xerxes would sit together in the library or the garden and talk. About everything, about nothing. About the future they were building, one careful day at a time. One night, 6 months after the fire, Elena found herself in the garden with Xerxes, looking up at the artificial sky. It was peaceful here, safe. I've been thinking, she said. Xerxes glanced at her. About? Your offer. About turning. He went very still. And? Elena took a breath. I'm not ready yet, but I think eventually I will be. She looked at him. I love my work, the archives, and there's so much to do. The registry is just the beginning. There are records scattered across the city, histories that need preserving. I could spend a lifetime on it. You could spend several lifetimes on it, Xerxes said quietly. If you chose. I know, Elena smiled. That's what I've been thinking about. Not living forever, but having enough time to finish, to do the work properly. She reached for his hand. And having enough time with you, not just 60 years, but more. Xerxes' fingers tightened around hers. You're sure? Not yet, but I'm getting there. Elena leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Ask me again. When the new registry is dedicated, when everything's settled, I will. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and close. Then Elena said, tell me what it's like turning. Xerxes was quiet for a long moment. It's dying and being reborn. It's painful and it's frightening, and when you wake you're different. Stronger, faster, sharper. But also hungry. The first years are difficult. You have to learn control. Learn to live with the need for blood. He looked down at her. But I'll be with you, every step. I'll teach you, guide you. You won't be alone. Promise. I promise. Elena believed him. She always did. The new Metropolitan Vampire Registry was dedicated on a cold autumn night. 1 year after the fire, the building was beautiful, steel and glass and stone, fireproof and floodproof, and built to last. The archives were climate-controlled, the vaults triple-secured. The main hall had been designed to accommodate both humans and vampires, with spaces for sunlight and shadow. Elena stood at the entrance, watching as the first visitors filed in. Humans and vampires, side by side, come to see the records that bound their city together. Xerxes was beside her, his hand warm in hers. He'd insisted on attending despite the politics. The vampire king dedicating a human institution. It was a statement. You did this, he said quietly. We did this. You saved the census. You stood before the council. This exists because of you, Elena smiled. It exists because someone tried to destroy it, and we wouldn't let them. The crowd thickened. Speeches were made, plaques unveiled. In the center of the main hall, behind glass, sat the salvaged ledger, burnt around the edges, smoke-stained but intact, a reminder of what had been saved, of what mattered. When the ceremony ended, Elena and Xerxes walked through the new archives together. The shelves were still mostly empty, waiting to be filled. It would take years to rebuild what had been lost. Decades, maybe. Elena had time. They stopped in front of a window that looked out over the city. Lights glittered in the darkness, human and vampire territories overlapping, intertwined. "I've decided," Elena said. Xerxes turned to her. "Decided? About turning, I want to." She met his eyes. "Not now, not tonight, but soon, when the archives are properly established. When I've trained my replacement for the daylight hours." She smiled. "I want to spend lifetimes with you, Xerxes. I want to finish the work. I want everything." Xerxes didn't speak. He pulled her into his arms and held her, his face buried in her hair, and Elena felt the shudder that went through him. "I love you," he said, his voice rough. "I will love you through the turning, through the hunger, through every year we have. I will love you until the world ends. That's a long time. Not long enough." Elena laughed, breathless and happy, and tilted her head back to kiss him. He kissed her back, fierce and careful and full of promise. When they broke apart, Xerxes said, "When you're ready, just tell me when." "I will." Elena chose a night in spring, when the city was green and alive and the air smelled like rain. She'd spent the day saying goodbye to the sun, walking through her favorite places, soaking in the warmth one last time. It hurt less than she'd expected. The sun was beautiful, but it wasn't everything. Xerxes was waiting for her in his rooms, and when she arrived, he looked at her for a long moment. "You're certain?" he asked. "Yes." "It will hurt, I know, and you'll wake different. I know that too." Elena crossed the room and took his hands. "I'm ready." Xerxes nodded. He'd explained the process weeks ago, his blood, then hers, then the turning itself. Death and rebirth, she would sleep, and when she woke she'd be vampire. "I'll be here," he said. "The whole time. You won't be alone." "I know." He kissed her, gentle and lingering. Then he bit his own wrist and held it to her mouth. "Drink." Elena drank. The blood was strange, metallic and sweet and burning. She felt it slide down her throat, felt the heat of it spreading through her veins. Xerxes watched her, his pale eyes intent, and when she'd taken enough, he pulled his wrist away. "Now me," he said. Elena nodded. Xerxes tilted his head, exposing his throat, and Elena leaned in. Her teeth weren't sharp yet, but he guided her, showed her where to bite. She felt his skin break under her mouth, felt the rush of blood, and drank until he told her to stop. When she pulled back, the world was already spinning. Xerxes caught her, lowered her onto the bed. His face was the last thing she saw before the darkness took her. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here." Elena believed him. And then she fell. She woke to hunger. It was all-consuming, violent, a need so sharp it obliterated thought. Elena gasped and tried to sit up, but hands held her down, strong hands, familiar hands. "Easy." Xerxes' voice calm and steady. "Elena, look at me." She forced her eyes open. The room was too bright, every detail sharp and overwhelming. She could hear everything, the hum of the ventilation, the distant sound of footsteps. Xerxes' steady heartbeat, smell everything, old books, stone, blood. "I'm hungry," she whispered, and her voice was raw. "I know, I have blood for you. But you need to focus first, breathe." Elena tried. Her lungs felt strange, unnecessary. She didn't need air the way she used to. But Xerxes was asking, so she breathed. "Good, now slowly, sit up." He helped her, his hands gentle but firm. Elena sat, and the world tilted. Too much input, too much sensation. She was going to lose her mind. "Focus on me," Xerxes said. "Just me. Look at my face. Listen to my voice." Elena did. His face was a constant, familiar and safe. His voice grounded her. Slowly, the chaos receded to manageable levels. "Good, you're doing well." He held up a glass of blood. "Drink this, it will help." Elena took the glass and drank. The hunger eased immediately, replaced by a warm satiation. She drained the glass and felt herself steady. "How do you feel?" Xerxes asked. "Strange. Everything's so loud. It will settle. Your senses are heightened now. You'll learn to control them." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're doing beautifully." Elena looked down at her hands. Pale now, the same bloodless white as his. She touched her mouth and felt the sharp points of fangs. "I'm a vampire," she said, and it sounded absurd. "You are." Elena started to laugh. It bubbled up from somewhere deep, half hysterical, half joyful. Xerxes smiled and pulled her into his arms, and she clung to him, laughing and shaking. "I'm a vampire," she said again. "I'm going to live forever." "We're going to live forever," Xerxes corrected. "Together." Elena pulled back to look at him. His face was serious, but his eyes were warm, full of love and relief and something that looked like wonder. "Together," she echoed. He kissed her, and it was different now. Sharper, more intense, every sensation magnified. Elena kissed him back and felt the future unfold before them. Centuries of work and love and small stolen moments in a library or a garden. Immortality not as a curse, but as a gift. "I love you," she said. "I love you," Xerxes replied. Always, the first months were difficult. Elena learned to control the hunger, to navigate her new senses, to exist in a world of night. Xerxes was patient, guiding her through every challenge, never leaving her side. Gregor helped too, and the other members of the House of Raith, accepting her as one of their own. Elena returned to the archives as soon as she was stable, working at night now, sleeping through the day. It was an adjustment, but the work was the same. The records still needed maintaining, the histories still needed preserving. And she had time. So much time. 5 years after the fire, the archives were thriving. Elena had expanded them, incorporating records from across the city, creating a comprehensive history of human-vampire relations that scholars traveled from across the country to consult. She'd hired a staff, trained assistants, built something that would outlast even her immortal life. Xerxes ruled with her at his side. Not publicly, she had no interest in politics, but privately. His advisor, his partner, his love. The council respected her. The houses knew better than to challenge her. And on quiet nights when the work was done, they would retreat to the library or the garden and just be together. 10 years after the fire, Elena stood in the archives and looked at the burnt ledger behind its glass. The one she'd saved, the one that had started everything. Xerxes came up behind her, his arms sliding around her waist. Thinking about that night, the fire. How close we came to losing everything. But we didn't lose it. You saved it. We saved it. Elena leaned back against him. Do you ever regret it? Walking into the fire? Never. You could have died. I could have, but I didn't. He turned her in his arms, his pale eyes serious. And I found you. I'd walk into 1,000 fires for that. Elena smiled. You're dramatic. I'm a vampire king. Drama is required. She laughed and kissed him, warm and sure. Outside, the city hummed with life. Humans and vampires living side by side, bound by laws and records and the fragile trust they'd built together. Inside, Elena and Xerxes held each other, immortal and in love, and the future stretched out before them like an endless page. Together, they would write it, and it would be beautiful.